She didn't think much of it the first time her Labrador dragged something out from under the couch. But the second time, and the third, she realized he wasn't just being playful. He was showing her something. And the strange part? Every time the dog brought her one of those small clues, her husband's face would tighten a little, like he hoped she wouldn't look too closely. That's when she started wondering, what did he think she would never find? And why did their dog look almost worried whenever her husband walked into the room? It was supposed to be a normal day. But the moment her dog dropped the final piece at her feet, she understood everything, far too late for him to hide it. When people looked at Maya and her husband Aaron from the outside, they often assumed their life was comfortable in that quiet, predictable way long marriages sometimes are. They had a modest home in a calm neighborhood, the kind with trimmed hedges and neighbors who waved when they walked their dogs. Nothing about them seemed unusual. Maya worked in interior staging for real estate listings, while Aaron worked long hours in tech consulting. Their routines were steady, and even if the spark wasn't the same as the early years, they treated each other with a kind of practiced politeness that made everything feel stable enough. At least that was how it looked. Their golden retriever, Milo, brought the kind of warmth the house occasionally lacked. He was 2 years old, energetic but gentle, and he followed Maya everywhere. She used to joke that he loved her more than anyone else ever had. He shadowed her in the kitchen, curled up near her desk while she worked, and waited outside the bathroom like he had been assigned security duty. People say golden retrievers are intuitive, but sometimes Milo acted like he understood things no one said out loud. The shift in their home started so quietly that at first Maya didn't even think anything was happening. Aaron had been leaving earlier and coming home later than usual, which wasn't something new for someone in his field, but the tone changed. Before, he'd send her a quick message or call if he knew he'd be late, just to keep things considerate. Now he would show up after dinner without warning, brushing off her questions with something vague about meetings that ran too long. He didn't sound irritated or defensive. If anything, he sounded detached, like his thoughts were somewhere else entirely. Maya tried not to read into it. They'd been married 12 years, and she knew people drifted in waves. She'd seen friends go through seasons where life got too noisy to pay attention to the small details. She told herself this was normal. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe his workload had spiked. Maybe she was the one being overly observant, but Milo reacted differently. Whenever Aaron walked through the door, the dog's ears would perk up, and he'd stand rigid for a second before approaching. He didn't bark or growl, but there was a hesitation in him, a slow uncertainty that wasn't there before. It was subtle enough that someone who didn't pay close attention to their dog might miss it, but Maya didn't. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Aaron said he had to step out for an hour to grab something from the office. Maya didn't question him. She just nodded and kept clearing the plates. After he left, Milo sat by the front door, whining softly. This wasn't his usual whine, the one he used when he wanted dinner or playtime. This was the quieter one, the one he used when he sensed something off. She put a hand on his head and told him everything was fine, even though she wasn't entirely convinced. Over the next few weeks, small inconsistencies lined up like puzzle pieces that didn't belong to the picture she thought they were building. Aaron's shirts picked up a faint vanilla scent that didn't come from their home or his usual detergent. His credit card statement showed a few small purchases that didn't make sense. 2 coffees instead of 1. A dinner charged at a place he didn't like. A ride-share receipt at a time when he told her he was already home. They weren't big signs, nothing dramatic, but enough to make her pause. What made everything stranger was how Aaron seemed overly polite around her, the kind of politeness someone uses when they're trying not to disturb the surface of something fragile. He would compliment her cooking more than usual, ask about her day with an oddly formal tone, and avoid arguments even when the topic invited one. He wasn't warmer, he wasn't colder, he was off. And every time he sat beside her on the couch, Milo would position himself on the other side, watching him with a silent alertness. One night, Maya woke up to the sound of Milo whining again. It was late, past 2 in the morning, and the house was quiet except for the AC humming through the vents. Milo wasn't at the foot of the bed like usual. Instead, he stood near the hallway, staring toward Aaron's office. His tail was stiff, and he kept glancing back at her as if asking her to follow. She brushed off the sleep and walked toward him. When she opened the office door, Milo went in first, sniffing the floor, the corners, the small rug by the desk. Nothing seemed out of place, but he kept circling the same area right under the drawer Aaron kept locked. The drawer had never meant anything to her. She assumed he kept old work files or spare gadgets inside. She tapped the drawer gently, more curious than suspicious, but Milo's reaction surprised her. He sat, straightened his back, and stared right at it like there was something she wasn't seeing. She let out a small laugh, mostly to ease her own nerves, and told Milo he was being dramatic. But he didn't move. That stillness stayed with her long after she went back to bed. Over the next few days, she noticed more things. Aaron had started keeping his phone face down, and he would turn off notifications when he was near her. He didn't do it in a sneaky way. There was no rushing or hiding. It was calm, almost casual, and that made her more uneasy. When someone hides something nervously, you pick up on it quickly. When someone hides something calmly, it means they've practiced. Maya found herself paying attention to patterns she never cared about before. She noticed he smiled at texts more often than he used to. She noticed he checked the clock at the same moments in the evening, as if he was waiting for something. She noticed he started taking Milo on shorter walks and only when she insisted. He didn't dislike the dog, but he had never been as connected to him as she was, and the change in distance made that lying feel even clearer. One afternoon, while she was arranging throw pillows at a new staging job, her phone buzzed with a text from Aaron asking if she needed anything from the store. She replied no and thanked him. It was a normal exchange, but Milo, who was with her at the house, lifted his head suddenly and looked toward the door like he heard something he didn't like. She knelt beside him, scratching behind his ears, and he leaned into her touch with that deep comfort only a dog can give. She whispered something about how he was her favorite guy, and the moment felt heavier than she expected. If someone had told her a year ago she'd be relying on a dog's instincts to understand her own marriage, she wouldn't have believed them. But then came the moment that shifted everything. It happened on a Saturday evening. Aaron said he was going to help a coworker move some furniture. The explanation sounded reasonable, simple, and harmless. He left, and within minutes Milo was pacing near the window. When Maya tried to distract him with toys, he ignored them. When she tried to call him over, he didn't budge. He kept whining, soft but steady, and then walked to the door, pressing his nose to the bottom of it, as if trying to follow a scent trail. She felt something tighten in her chest. It wasn't panic. It wasn't suspicion. It was a quiet recognition that something in her home had already changed, and she was only now catching up to it. She grabbed Milo's leash, slipped on her jacket, and told him they were going for a walk. He bolted toward the driveway, tugging the leash harder than he ever had before, pulling her toward the direction Aaron usually drove. She hadn't planned to follow him, not really. She just wanted to quiet the uneasiness in her chest. But Milo kept pulling, taking her farther down the street, then around a corner, then toward an intersection she rarely used. It took her a moment to realize where they were going. And when she saw where Milo led her, when she saw the car parked near a place she had never known, Aaron visited her breath caught in a way she couldn't control. Nothing dramatic happened that night. Nothing loud, nothing cinematic. Just a quiet confirmation that the distance she had been feeling wasn't something she imagined. And Milo had led her straight to it. Maya stood across the street with Milo sitting quietly at her side, his leash resting loosely in her hand. She didn't move closer, and she didn't need to. Aaron's car was parked outside a townhouse she had never visited, and the soft glow behind one of the curtains told her enough. If this had been a scene from one of those dramatic shows people binge late at night, maybe she would have barged in or confronted someone on a porch. But that wasn't who she was. She wasn't impulsive. She wasn't loud. She didn't need a spectacle. She just needed the truth, and the truth was already settled in her chest. She exhaled slowly, and Milo nudged her hand, sensing her stiffness. She rubbed behind his ear to calm herself, though the motion helped her more than him. Standing there, she felt a mix of disappointment and clarity. She didn't cry. She didn't even feel that familiar sting behind her eyes. It was more like a quiet acknowledgement that a line had already been crossed long before she arrived. After a moment, she turned around and walked home with Milo trotting closely beside her. The night air felt cool, and each step gave her space to think without spiraling. She wasn't rehearsing speeches or playing out arguments in her head. She was just letting herself come to terms with the fact that the life she thought she was living had split open in a way she couldn't ignore. When Aaron came home later than expected, carrying the same polite tone he'd been using for weeks, she didn't confront him. Not yet. He set his keys on the counter and told her the furniture move took longer than he expected. She nodded, responded with something neutral, and watched him move around the kitchen. Nothing about him looked guilty in that exaggerated way movies tend to portray. He looked normal, too normal. And that made her even more certain. For the next week, she didn't change her behavior, which seemed to throw him off. She wasn't cold or distant. She simply paid attention. She noticed when he checked his phone and angled the screen away from her. She noticed how he stepped outside to take calls, even when the weather didn't match that choice. She noticed he flinched ever so slightly when Milo walked over to him during certain moments, as if the dog might expose him somehow. What she didn't expect was the quiet shift in Milo. He became more protective, not in an aggressive way, but in a perceptive one. Whenever Aaron entered a room, Milo watched him a little too closely. Whenever Maya moved away, he followed. Nights felt heavier because Milo stayed awake longer, often lying near the bedroom door instead of curling at the foot of the bed. It was as if he sensed the tension that hadn't been spoken yet. One evening, while Maya organized some old boxes in the garage, she found something that deepened the quiet heaviness in her chest. Inside a small tote they rarely used, she found a stack of envelopes tied with a ribbon. They weren't addressed to her. They were addressed to Aaron from a person she had never heard of. The handwriting was careful, and the dates stretched back almost a year. She opened one, expecting something mundane, maybe notes about a hobby or a work-related project. But instead she found short, simple messages about dinners, inside jokes, and plans that didn't involve her. Instead of anger, she felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. It was the kind of calm people describe when they finally stop guessing. She wasn't searching for clues or doubting herself anymore. The answers were right in front of her, written clearly in someone else's handwriting. She closed the envelope, placed it back where she found it, and tied the ribbon again. She didn't plan on showing Aaron the letters. She wasn't collecting evidence for a fight. She didn't want a dramatic confrontation. She just wanted to understand what her next steps needed to be. That night, after Aaron fell asleep, she sat on the living room floor with Milo resting his head on her lap. She ran her fingers through his fur while her thoughts settled. She wasn't heartbroken in the way she thought she would be. It felt more like she had slowly been losing the version of her marriage she loved, and tonight she finally accepted it was gone. She whispered to Milo that she'd be okay, even though she still wasn't sure what okay looked like anymore. The next morning, that acceptance shifted into something more practical. She made breakfast, packed her work bag, and went through her usual routine. But she also made a quiet decision. She wasn't going to waste weeks waiting for a confession that would probably never come. She wanted honesty, even if she had to be the one to initiate it. Not with shouting, not with accusations, just clarity. That evening, she asked Aaron if they could talk after dinner. He looked surprised, maybe even nervous, but he agreed. They sat in the living room, and she kept her voice even and calm as she told him she knew something was going on. She didn't list every clue or mention the townhouse or the letters. She didn't want to lead him into telling her what she already knew. She wanted him to choose the truth, or choose to lie, so she could understand exactly where they stood. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. His eyes shifted, and he swallowed hard, but no confession came. Instead, he leaned on his usual explanation: work stress, long hours, misunderstanding. The more he talked, the more detached she felt, as if they were sitting on two different planets. She waited, hoping he would realize she wasn't asking for excuses, but honesty wasn't coming. Milo, who had been lying near Maya's feet, got up suddenly and walked over to Aaron. He pressed his nose against Aaron's pocket, and Aaron stiffened. Maya watched closely. Milo pawed at the pocket again, and Aaron snapped at him, a quick, frustrated sound that Maya had never heard him use before. The reaction was too sharp, too revealing. She looked at Aaron, then nodded toward the pocket. "What's in there?" He hesitated, his jaw tightening. For a moment he looked like someone trying to calculate the safest answer. Then, reluctantly, he pulled out a small folded note, the same handwriting as the letters in the garage. He didn't say anything while handing it over. Maya didn't open it. She didn't need to. She set it on the table between them, and the silence that followed felt final. Not dramatic, not noisy. Just final. She told him, in the same steady tone, that she didn't want to keep pretending their marriage was something it wasn't anymore. She wasn't angry, and she didn't call him names. She simply explained that she wanted to move forward in a direction that didn't include deception. He didn't argue. He didn't reach for her hand. He just looked tired in a way that suggested he understood this conversation had been waiting for them for a long time. Over the next few days, they discussed logistics calmly, respectfully. They agreed to separate, and Maya planned to stay in the house temporarily while they sorted things out. Friends might have expected chaos or dramatic emotions, but the ending felt more like two people finally acknowledging the truth rather than destroying anything. The house grew quiet, but not in a lonely way. It felt more like the air had space again. Milo noticed the shift too. He became more relaxed, more settled. The tension in his posture faded day by day, and he returned to sleeping at the foot of her bed instead of guarding the door. One afternoon, while walking Milo in a nearby park, Maya found herself smiling at small things: the breeze, the long stretch of green grass, the way Milo splashed his paws in a puddle. She didn't feel like someone who had lost something. She felt like someone who finally stopped holding her breath. As the weeks passed, she rearranged parts of her home, not to erase memories, but to create a new rhythm. She added warmer lighting in the living room, replaced a few framed photos, and adopted a small routine of making tea in the evenings while Milo curled beside her. It wasn't a dramatic reinvention. Just small, steady steps toward feeling like herself again. She never told Aaron about following him that night, and she didn't mention Milo leading her there. Some truths didn't need to be spoken. She didn't feel the need for closure in the way people often describe. The closure had come the moment she realized she didn't need answers to move forward. She just needed honesty with herself. Months later, while she sat on the back porch watching Milo chase a butterfly across the lawn, she thought about everything that had happened. It didn't feel like a tragic story or a dramatic heartbreak. It felt like a necessary turning point, one she never expected but one she was grateful for in a quiet, grounded way. Life had a strange way of revealing things, sometimes through long conversations, sometimes through accidental discoveries, and sometimes through a dog who simply knew his person deserved better. As the sun dipped lower, she leaned back in her chair and took a deep breath. She had no idea what her next chapter would look like, but she felt ready for it. And Milo, who trotted back to her with his tongue hanging out and his tail wagging wildly, seemed ready too. Before going inside, she scratched the top of his head and told him something she had been thinking for a long time. It wasn't dramatic or poetic. It was simple and true. "You saved me more than you know." And Milo, who always understood her in ways she couldn't explain, pressed his head against her knee like he agreed.